Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Agora Podcast with Byron Reese. I am so excited today. My guest is Aidan McCullen, and it's always hard to introduce people like him because they've done so many things, and I don't even know where to begin. He's had a multiple number of lives of ways he's reinvented himself and changed himself. But I really want to talk to him today about his book called Undisruptable. It's subtitled A Mindset of Permanent Reinvention for Individuals, Organizations, and Life. And that's what I'd like to talk to him about today.
Welcome to the Agora Podcast with Byron Reese, as he talks with great minds about what they're working on, what problems they're solving, and what passions drive them forward. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show, Aidan.
It's great to be with you, man. I always enjoy our conversations. I learn a lot from you, so I'm always delighted to be up for a learning session.
Oh, no. Well, thank you for saying that. But let's always begin at the beginning, as Lewis Carroll always said. How did you come to start thinking about change and deciding that you were going to write a book about how to think about it? Like, where did all that begin?
Well, I when I retired from career in professional rugby, which is a forced upon you change, I went into what I didn't know was then digital transformation, because I really retired into the 2008-2009 recession, where sports takes off and businesses obviously plummet. But I had enough of rugby. I didn't enjoy it anymore. I was constantly getting injured, and it was just becoming a struggle. I wasn't making any more progress. So I retired. It was an easy decision, I would say, because of those final years where I was injured or not selected. So I worked for a company in media, digital transformation. Didn't realize that was what it was. It was the only job really going. I was an intern at the very, very start as a 31-year-old, and quickly became the CEO of that business within a few years. And that business became vital to the survival of that organization going onwards. So that was my first foray into digital transformation. And a few years after I'd started there, I started to read about it because I applied the same discipline I had in sport to the work in digital transformation. I just showed up all the time. It was like the guy at training all the time, and they were like, we better pick this guy. So I did the same. I started reading, and I started to notice the patterns of innovation and change were what I was experiencing, the resistance, the idea that you can't change business models until you change mental models. All that stuff started to emerge for me, and that was the start of it all.
And so what was the kind of that next chapter of your life after? What did you immediately do after you left professional sports?
Well, that was it. I mean, I would actually go back and go, the first real chapter was the professional sports, in that I had been a really clumsy, awkward, amorphous blob of a child, really. I wasn't very good at any sport. I failed my way into some type of success eventually because most of the really talented players stopped playing in their late 16, 17, 18-year-old. And I started really getting into the sport then. I was playing professional sport for a sport that I only really picked up when I was 16, and I was playing for my country 7 years later. So it was I quickly mastered this sport that I was, and I have to emphasize, I wasn't that athletic. So I worked really hard, and I think I'd found this formula, and the formula was the discipline. That discipline can actually bring you quite far, even if you're not that talented. And I was okay. It was, I would say I learned talent, but I really learned discipline. And discipline has been the key to everything I've done since then. So the first chapter was the transformation into that player. And then the second transformation was the one where you're in this early 30s, kid on the way, heavy mortgage. It's not like NFL, Byron, where you're paid a lot of money. You're not paid that amount of money. It's good money, but it's not enough to sustain you afterwards. You have to reinvent yourself. And because I had that discipline, it was quite easy for me because I just applied the same discipline to work that I did to sport beforehand.
I remember reading in the book that you said that the people who are like stars in high school often they don't have that. It came to them too easily. And so when the going gets rough, they don't actually have all those skills, and that you would rather put your money on somebody who had to work to get there.
Absolutely. Like, I will always think about, who would you rather go to war with? You'd rather go to the war with the person who's may not be the superstar, may not be the big ego, but actually will show up and support you, rather than maybe shoot you in the back and hide under your body. So a coach said to me, I did this thing, it was great. It was I highly recommend anybody doing this. If you have something that you feel is unresolved or you have questions about, is go and find somebody that was involved in that incident in your life. For example, for me, it was the coach who picked me to play for Ireland. I wonder, is there anything else I could have gone and done? Is there anything I could have done to make things better for myself? Did I do anything wrong? Did I max out my talent? And he gave me this brilliant line. He said, Aidan, there's 3 types of player in the world. There's a talented player, there's a disciplined player, and the role of the coach is to make the talented player disciplined. And he said, you, my friend, were very disciplined. And I was like, message received, buddy. I did well. So I think that was a real lesson for me, but also a lesson in reaching out to those difficult conversations and having them just to resolve them, so you don't waste any cognitive energy on them ever again.
I think of a quote by Michelangelo. It's one of my very favorite quotes, and he may not have said it. He may have said it. He may really have said it, but it's not proven. And but the quote is, if you knew how much work it is, you wouldn't call it genius. Because, people would look at the Sistine Chapel of the Pietà and say, oh my gosh, he's a genius. And he's like, if you knew how much work that was, you wouldn't call it that.
Absolutely, man. I think that's the biggest thing. If there's anything I give to my children, it is the importance of the discipline, and the discipline is not a bad thing. So I can see this in my son at the moment, that he was similar to me, kind of amorphous blob of a kid that wasn't really very good at any sport. And then he started to find himself he does MMA and jiu-jitsu, those kind of sports. And he's started to get pretty big, in good shape, good looking kid, kind of has grown into himself. He's only going on 14. And I spot in him what I saw in myself, because actually there's a little bit of ego here as well, is that all of a sudden people start to notice you, and you kind of go, oh, this thing I'm doing is actually paying off. So what I tried to do with him and go, look at this, look at where you've come from. Even 2 years ago, I'll show him pictures of himself and I go, look, this is because of the discipline. This is because you've showed up. None of your friends are doing this. They're staying up till 2 a.m. playing Xbox and PlayStation. You're not. You're going to bed. You're getting up. You're having good breakfast for yourself. And now I'm trying to get him to realize this template can be applied to studying. That's a difficult one, as a father. I'm trying to get him to see the same lens and go, you can use this as a superpower that you can use for everything.
I want to go through the book, and I don't want to use all of our time up front, but one thing that always strikes me talking to you and all through the book is you have this wealth of anecdotes, and you have this enormous amount of just dead-on quotations that you find. How do you find all those? I know maybe that's an unanswerable question, like how do you get your ideas? Yeah. But do you have a process for finding those nuggets, or maybe everybody finds them, but you're really good at identifying them and saying, that's good?
Exactly the same as you, man, I'm sure. So for me, going to the gym is the exact same as writing. It's the exact same as reading. You are a prolific writer. I write weekly. I write an article every week, and I publish that article every week. I do my show every week. I've never missed one, Byron, in the 8 years I'm doing it, either writing or doing the show. In fact, I've done more than one show a week. And as you know, I pride myself in actually reading the book of the author before they appear on the show. And just for our audience, Byron's been on the show a couple of times, brilliant writing. So we covered his books on that show. And I do read the book. So if you have been reading a book every week for 8 years, you're bound to have loads and loads of knowledge in there. But I think the key for me is writing. So when I write, it organizes my thinking, and once that has been done, it kind of stuff sticks in there. Even if it's 10% of the knowledge that I read about over my lifetime, that's where it comes from. And then I do keynote speak and I run workshops, and I repeat some of those stories, and I'll come across quotes through the writing. I like to read eclectically as well, and I'll always store them. And I do this thing, I mentioned it in the book. I have a specific Gmail address that I send ideas and quotes to. And then when I'm writing articles, I go there, that's the well, and I go to the well and I kind of go, oh, that's a good one for this article I'm writing, etc. So they kind of stick over time.
Yeah, I noticed that when you said that, because I have a spreadsheet I've been keeping since 1991.
Wow.
On a DOS machine. It still has an 8-letter file name in all caps.
Brilliant.
And I have all my quotes, all my pieces of trivia, and now it's several thousand, and I have to go through and I reread them all.
Wow.
Oh, that's a really good one. And because I have to just keeping them current in my thinking, so that when I do go to write, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. Oh, yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one. So synthesis is about bringing things together that don't look connected. And so let's go through. You say, first of all, people are resistant to change. And you say that people are, I think what happens is people can always see what they can lose, but they're not really good at seeing what they can gain. And so it always maybe looks lopsided when it comes to them. So how do people, and end of chapter 1, you're talking about people are naturally resistant to it. They don't want to do it. How do people develop the discipline to kind of overcome that? Because you can't will yourself. You can't, knowing something doesn't give you necessarily the power to overcome it. So how do people, like, is there a meditation, or how do people get comfortable with the idea that's really can be an opportunity, that there is no growth without it?
So unfortunately, people need some type of crisis. They lose their job, they have the rug pulled under their feet, their business goes bankrupt, etc., and then they're forced to make the change. But only a very few people are proactively looking for the opportunities to jump onto a new opportunity, a new season, in order to ride a new wave. And those people are usually very well read. I think those people are aware of burgeoning trends, much like you would have done with some of your businesses. People who understand where things are going are willing to let go of things from the past, including success that they've had. So they're at the top of their ladder and they realize this ladder's against the wrong wall. They're willing to go back down to the start of a new ladder and start all over again. But they don't, I think the people who do this successfully are people who realize that they've built up some type of capability before they need that capability. And this is a key message, as you know, in the book, is that you build capability before you need it, or as the Spartan warrior mantra goes, the more you sweat in times of peace, the less you bleed in war. And I think that's the key.
Do you come across people who are like that 10% who are like change happy? They always chase the shiny new thing, and it's always like, oh, that looks better. Oh my gosh, that looks better. And they don't stick with it because it's about timing. You can't overdo it, right? And so how do you know? And maybe there is no easy answer to that question, I know that. But how do you know when you're like not? When it's time to stay the course?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm probably like you. I recognize we're pretty similar in this case. Is that the term I heard is dopaminergic, so highly dopamine driven, always looking for the new opportunity, etc. Now, I've realized this. Say, for example, writing the books, I have held back. I have loads of books I want to write. This is the first. This book is part of a trilogy. I've held off writing the next one because I'm like, this is like U2. So I heard this great story. The band U2, when they had their manager, a guy called Paul McGuinness, great Irish name. He was managing them, and they're like going, "Oh, Paul, we got a new album. We got a new album." He's going, "No, you don't. We're gonna wait a few years, write this album out, do the tours, etc. And he invented that whole kind of way of touring, etc. The detachable kind of, the rig outs that you would bring from city to city. And I heard about that before years ago, and I was like, I'm going to definitely do that. And you know yourself, you start to notice that the decline is happening if you're tuned into it. So people stop booking you for keynotes from me about the book, or it seems pretty old or exhausted. But the danger for me has been, I don't want to confuse people and let them think I'm into a different thing yet. So that's how I manage it as I go. I just manage the influx. I try to do the same things to market my work, etc. But if I notice that despite that, the market is no longer interested, then I'll actually go and jump to a new existence, a new S-curve, as I talk about in the book.
But you even put in the book that what happens in companies, at least, is that when they wait for a crisis, they end up panicking and making kind of knee-jerk reactions to that, and because they're not in a good mental place, they're like panicking. So I guess it's like what you're saying is, the next thing you're going to do, and now you're listening to the market tell you when the time is right to do it, but you're not going to be making that decision then. Am I reading the tea leaves there correctly?
Brilliant. The thing for me is, if you would, and I didn't lean too heavily on this, but I'm really, really interested in neuroscience and how the brain works, etc. And if you wait till the crisis, so to throw a Hail Mary pass, so in Rugby, I'll go back to rugby, we had plays that you would do if you were like 2 points down at the end of the game. We had a play that you would pull out of the bag and hopefully play it off. And most teams didn't have something like that. Most teams didn't have a really intelligent play for if they were in crisis mode. And in NFL, American football, you guys call it a Hail Mary pass. You throw that pass, hopefully it goes to hand somewhere. And many organizations wait and do that, and they put all their eggs in one basket on one idea, and they make this big Hail Mary. It doesn't go to hand. They're in trouble. But one of the things is, if you reverse and you go back to that Spartan warrior mantra, the more you sweat in times of peace, the less you bleed in war. If I had been building capability, trying things that don't always work out, but building capability in my organization to try things, to innovate, etc., then I have the muscle built for when I need that muscle. And organizations that wait till the crisis go into organizational fight or flight mode. And in fight or flight mode, blood is diverted from your forebrain, which is responsible for your sound decision making, to your fists for fight and to your feet for flight. So you become less intelligent. So people are stressed, they're less intelligent. This is why people forget things when they're stressed, or they, have that argument and kind of, what did I say again? And 20 minutes later, it all comes rushing back, or things they wish they had said. The exact same thing happens in organizational decision making. People wait until the crisis, they're stressed, they make poor decisions. So this is a huge part of my work is, don't wait till the crisis. You have to have some small cohort of your organization, if it's a large organization, constantly looking at new opportunities. That's their job. That's their raison d'etre. But most people don't do that. And instead, they put all their eggs into exploitation of the current advantage, and they stop exploring the future. A very brief anecdote that I didn't include in the book. You'll know this from ants. I know you have a deep love of how nature works, etc. But if you take a piece of information, like a piece of apple, and you throw it into a colony of ants, not all the ants will go to it. Only a small minority will always go, nah, I'm not going near that. I'll go and I'll look for a strawberry or something more interesting. And I think the same happens in any population, any animals, including us, is that there's always this dopaminergic team of this portion of the population who are always exploring something new. And they're like kind of going, that's boring. That's just an apple. Let's see what else is out there. And we need those people. But unfortunately, most of those people in an organization are reviled or misunderstood or attacked because they're kind of going, yeah, but yeah, I know this is great and all, but like there's stuff over here that we should experiment with or investigate, and oftentimes they're just shut down.
I did this exercise once where I wrote down all these firms that are known by their initials, IBM and all that. And then I went and looked at what those letters stood for. And so you just take a few. IBM, International Business Machines. NCR is National Cash Register. 3M is Minnesota Manufacturing Mining. Geico is Government Employee Insurance Company, and on and on and on. And the fascinating thing about it is none of them do the things in their name anymore.
Oh, wow.
None of them. American Telephone and Telegraph, right? They don't do telegraphs. Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining makes Post-it notes.
Yeah.
Geico is not just Government Employee Insurance Company. And so there's something about those companies that allowed them to change in ways that are antithetical to their name. Like, I see this truck around Austin, and it says, Houston Avocado. We're not just avocados. And I'm thinking, you're not even in Houston either. It's like, so somehow these people are able to overcome it. And then you look at the opposite. You take companies like Kodak, and they had a phrase. It's a Kodak moment.
Hey.
And why don't they own digital film? A case you talk about, Netflix. You go to Blockbuster. Blockbuster had all the customers. They had the brand. They had all the relationships with the studios. They had all of that, and yet they didn't make it. They don't own streaming. They should. But they don't. And so I don't want to distill it down. I don't want to distill the differences between those two kinds of cases down to a few rules, because I think life is much more complicated than that. I have noticed that all different kinds of advice exist in two opposite forms. So people say, look before you leap. But they also say, he who hesitates is lost. Those mean opposite things. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush versus nothing ventured, nothing gained. They all are opposite. So the idea that you can distill business advice down to a few rules that you need to keep in your mind isn't true. What happens is there's a million rules that we then force onto the narrative after the fact, and we say, well, they didn't stick to the knitting, or they didn't change with the times. So I'm curious with all that lead in. You got all these companies that don't even do what their initials are, and then you have all these companies that should have had a slam dunk and failed. Do you have any intuition about, did they get lucky? Did they build a culture that accepted it? Did they just happen to, what do you think happened?
Well, the thing I see from the literature, so bear in mind that I study this, so I would say I'm a scholar of this. I've been reading it, and I go back into the older books. So I've interviewed all these really classical authors in innovation. I did a series on Clayton Christensen's work, Michael Tushman, for example, and Charles O'Reilly went deep into their work. And I look at all these cases, and firstly, like what you're saying about this being able to let go of the legacy is absolutely essential. Like this whole idea of letting go of your successes of the past, including the language. A language, as you know, is so powerful. I mentioned in the book the word abracadabra basically means to create as you speak, and it's this ancient word. And I think that is absolutely so true. A great case study in this was when Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft, was interviewed by Charlie Rose after his career. He was asked, why didn't you change? Why didn't you change things? Because he was asked what was his biggest regrets. He said, I should have got us into hardware sooner. He said, if you look at the most lucrative organizations in the world, they all make phones. He said, I should have got us there quicker. And he goes, well, why didn't you then? And he said this key thing. He goes, when the name of your company is Microsoft, he said, we were software guys. And if you think about that, the power of the language, that was their guiding light. And organizations like you mentioned IBM, they were investing in AI when AI was deep in its winter. You know this, man. You've written about this. They were way ahead of the curve with Watson, with Deep Blue, playing Kasparov in the chess, all that stuff. Decades before it's become popular, they were talking about this, and they almost didn't survive those depths of winter, but they built the muscle. And in a way, maybe they were a little bit too early with all of this, and they lost their kind of gloss with the whole thing. But they were willing to invest in these kind of, I always think about this big tanker, you know, big Titanic ship, and they have like people on little jet skis going out and exploring different little areas, looking for blue oceans that they can bring back to the Titanic, or hopefully not the Titanic, but to the tanker. And I think that's those organizations who have done that. But the biggest case study I talk about, as you know, is Fujifilm. So Fujifilm versus Kodak. Fujifilm were number 2, Kodak were number 1 for years. Fujifilm was seen as an inferior product. Kodak goes bankrupt in 2012. Fujifilm were thriving, but no longer really as a film business. So what they did was they went back to basics, and they went, what capabilities, going back to that term we talked about, what have we built that we can use in this organization? And they really dissected the organization. And there's really 2 transformations going on at any time with any kind of business transformation. There's the transformation of the old, that's kind of right-sizing it, letting go of people, maybe closing plants or shuttering pieces of the organization that no longer are valuable, selling them off, hopefully. And then there's developing the new business, excuse the pun, in the Fujifilm case. But this was like, what can we do, guys? And somebody in the organization goes, well, you know, we've developed this real great capability in understanding anti-aging. You know, one of the key and core components of film is collagen. Collagen's also used for makeup. And we have a deep understanding of antioxidants and all these type of effects that are needed so the film doesn't go old. So they launch a makeup brand. Astalift is born, and that makes billions of dollars, still thriving business today. And much like businesses like Philips, that most people will know as an electrical company or for light bulbs, they're a healthcare business now. So they were willing to gradually kill off the old business or sell it off or spin it off some way in order to take the profits from the old in order to invest in the new. And man, this is nature itself. This is how seasons work. You don't wait until winter, the depths of winter, to plant your bulbs for the new spring. You do that in late autumn or even in summer, some cases. So you always build that new capability when things are going well. So you're not in fight or flight mode, because then you're going to be more tolerant of the mistakes that are symbiotic when it comes to innovation. You're going to fade your way towards success. Not all ideas work. Just like when you plant 100 bulbs, maybe 50 will make it into the spring for you to enjoy their flowering then. Exact same as business. And I know you said you can't distill it into a few laws, but you look at the laws of nature itself. And the more I read, the more I see there are universal laws for stuff. You can't resist change because that's going to lead to misery. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to go along with the flow. And you always have this portion of the population who are willing to do that, and a huge portion that resist it.
Point taken. So we're coming up on time here, and I just want to ask you one last question, which is kind of how has change changed? So if presumably how you think about change changes. So is there any advice that you would give different today than you would have given, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because change itself is somehow different?
Well, I think the world has woken up. I mean, you wrote about the fourth age a long time ago. You wrote about AI a long time ago. I think only a small portion of people could see the unbelievable impact that AI is going to have on society. And I studied this stuff. I knew it. I can see it. Unfortunately, I see you're very much a tech optimist. I see a lot of dystopian side of it. Not because I'm some type of theorist or some type of negative thinker, more because people will resist the change that they need to make. And that for me is huge. So the way I think about people is they need to be like stem cells and be willing to just reinvent themselves and redeploy themselves. And that's very, very difficult for people to let go of their identities that they've created for themselves. So one of the huge things that's changed for me is to be more present as well. So to be more in joy when things are going well. So this is on a personal level. I'm going to go there first. Is I'm trying to be more present, because if I take them, you mentioned, I've had amazing experience in life. I've been so lucky with my life. I've had these different lives within a life. And I have to tell you, I was very rarely present. I very rarely stopped and smelled the flowers and went, oh my God, this is amazing. I don't think I ever did. And I was thinking about this recently, and I was kind of going, I actually have a pretty good now. I have a pretty good job. I enjoy it. My family are healthy, etc. I'm going to actually smell the roses here for a moment and go, this is great. And that's one thing. So that idea of, if you're dopaminergic and you're driven by always creating a new future, you're never present, came to mind for me. So that's been a huge change on a personal level. But on a global level, then there's the AI thing that's absolutely rewriting the rules of business and everything, and creative people who thought they were sacrosanct and could never be replaced are being replaced, marketers are being replaced, etc. So that's happening on a global level. But I think what you're probably more referring to is, like, for example, the Jack Welch quote that if the speed of change on the outside exceeds the speed on the inside, the end is near. Or as Heraclitus said in 50 BC, he said, no man ever walks in the same river twice, because he's not the same river, and it's not the same river, he's not the same man. So the river is always changing as well. And I think the biggest thing I have learned about, say, organizational change is that while incumbents that had been disrupted in the past, like the Blockbusters or like the Kodaks, had been poster children of disruption, they're actually getting their game together, and they're realizing that they have all the capabilities inside in the organization. If they can unlock those entrepreneurs in the organization, that they can really create change. And they are waking up to that. And I used to think that once an organization was old, it was gone. It was headed towards the top of the S curve, headed into deep winter. But I think organizations are waking up and kind of going, actually, we have everything here that a startup wants. Like you said about Blockbuster, I have existing relationships, I have a marketing department, I have know-how, I have institutional knowledge. If I can unlock that and redeploy it elsewhere to some new product or service that I've tested, we can get to market much, much quicker. And I think that's the big thing I've noticed, is that organizations are getting their head together, they're getting their game together. And that's great for society, because if we have entrepreneurs building new businesses and existing organizations not going bankrupt, then we have more jobs for people in an age of AI.
You know, I said that would be the last question, but I do have one more. So, well, just as you were talking, it made me think. Because you're right, there are rules. To say there aren't things you can learn would be nihilistic. I just said, I didn't do whatever. And that's not what I was trying to say, but I was sitting there thinking, yeah, it's sort of, that's what I was trying to say. And I guess I think of it like this, and I'm just curious your unvarnished thoughts on this. I had the occasion to go to the Lego factory and meet with the CEO. And Lego went through a hard time in the 90s. It looked like it might go out of business. Now the biggest toy company in the world. And I asked the CEO, how did Lego survive? And he said, we realized there's only one thing we do well, and it's make this brick. We're not really good at running theme parks or this or that, but we're really good at making bricks. And so that was like their superpower. And so they just said, well, and then I thought about Western Union. So they used to be telegrams. And worse than that, those were the telegrams in the U.S. you would get when your loved one passed away in battle. And so you were like a death telegram. And if you thought that was your business, if you thought, we're in the Telegram business, then you are irrelevant. But if you say if you say, no, our superpower isn't telegrams, our superpower is sending secure information, then all of a sudden you just keep saying, how do I apply that in a new world, in a world where everything's different? What secure information do you need to send now? Money. Okay, let's let people send money around. So it's the same superpower. It's the same thing your organization does really well. And the challenge isn't changing that. It's saying, how do you apply that in a different world? What do we do with that superpower there? And that's, to your point, that those companies have a lot going for them. They're big and have money and resources and all of that. And then, so maybe that's what, if I had to distill it down to a rule, it would be figure out what your superpower is and then figure out how you use that superpower as the world changes.
I agree, man. And it's really, it's not seeing your business as a product or industry bound. It's actually seeing what your capabilities are and where they can be deployed elsewhere. So, for example, I'm not an automobile manufacturer. I'm in the mobility business. I move people around, which can mean you're in maps or whatever you want to be in. But there's one thing, and I might finish on this one, is that means letting go. And the most difficult thing I saw many of my colleagues in sport was they clung to the jersey and they became the jersey. And they saw that as, this is who I am. What am I without this jersey? And you're kind of going, dude, you're in your early 30s. Like, you've got another 3 or 4 cycles in you if you do this right. And I think the same thing happens in business. People create an identity for themselves. Like I was saying to you about my son, or I did, that all of a sudden people start to notice you and you're kind of going, oh, I'm important here. And I think that's the ego trap. You start to think that you're important. And I actually think the less you care, the more you're capable of reinventing yourself. If you're not stereotyped, and you were saying it's hard to introduce me, it's hard for me to introduce myself to people, what do I do? My kids' friends are always kind of going, what should their dad do? And they're like, I don't know. So it comes down to this key thing, and I love this story, and I'll finish with this story. I call this the coconut trap. And you've read the book, you know what this is. So in an age where people used to trap monkeys and sell them as pets or to zoos, they use this ingenious technique to do so. So they'd take a coconut and they'd hollow out a little hole in it and they'd stuff it with fruit and they'd hang it on a tree that monkeys would frequent. And in time, monkeys would smell the fruit, come to the tree, and they'd squeeze their hand into that tiny little hole in order to take the fruit. And once they did that and grasped the fruit, they created a fist. And the fist, of course, would not come out of that tiny hole that they squeezed their hand in. And despite seeing the potential captors coming to take them, that could have meant death, but certainly being captivity for the rest of their life, they clung to the fruit. And I think that's one of the biggest things people do with their careers, with those colleagues I played with in sport, with their identities, and organizations with their identities, like you identified with all those organizations. You have to let go of the past in order to enjoy the future.
Aidan, thank you so much. You're a brilliant guy. We could go on and on. I can't wait to see what you do next. But for now, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for being on the show. And you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
An absolute pleasure, man, as always.
If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe so that more folks like you can become a part of the Agora. Visit ByronReese.com for more information about each episode and to learn about Byron's forthcoming book, We Are Agora.